Hello, Year 9. Hope you had a lovely break. For this lesson, you're going to need a pen, a pencil, a ruler, and the sources sheet that's on class charts as well. We'll start off with a bit of retrieval practice for the do now. So we've got 3 questions for you. Firstly, what was the Blitz? So a simple description, a couple of sentences would be great. Question 2, describe what happened in the bombing of Dresden. Again, a couple of sentences here describing what happened at Dresden. And finally, how well did the British government protect its citizens from aerial bombing? That one's an explain question, so you're going to need a little bit more. You need to actually give me a because in an answer. So you please pause the video now. Give yourself 5 minutes to do that. Right, some answers then. So firstly, the Blitz was the aerial bombing campaign of Britain by Nazi Germany from 1940 to 41. Question 2, the centre of Dresden was bombed by British and US planes. They dropped so many incendiary bombs they created a firestorm of over 1,000 degrees Celsius. The fire grew so large that civilians suffocated from lack of oxygen. And finally, number 3, the British government did quite a good job at providing shelter for its citizens. 3 different types of shelter were provided, including brick-built Morrison and Anderson shelters, as well as the people of London using tube stations for protection. This resulted in far fewer civilian casualties than other European nations. We're on to our last part of looking at World War II and aerial bombing of civilians. So could you please write in the title for today, why did the USA drop nuclear bombs on Japan? And underline it, and please put a date in as well. If you need time to do that, please pause the video now. I'm thinking about the engagement here in World War II. How did it begin? Well, 7 a.m. Sunday the 7th of December 1941, 183 Japanese bomber planes launched a surprise attack on Pearl Harbor, an American naval base in the Hawaiian Islands. In under 2 hours, 21 US warships were sunk or damaged, 177 planes were destroyed, and over 2,000 men were killed. Now, the reason that so many planes were destroyed in this particular attack was the Americans were worried about how many Japanese people lived in Hawaii. It was the largest ethnic group of Hawaiians, and they were afraid of sabotage. And so what they did is they parked all of their planes on the runway. So when the Japanese attacked, they were in a nice neat line for them, and they could just destroy them all in one go. And so 177 planes destroyed. I think it was something like they destroyed over 100 planes in the first couple of minutes. Just to give you an idea there. Japanese lost just 29 planes. And the next day, the USA and Britain declared war on Japan. 3 days after that, Germany and Italy declared war on the USA. So that's how we have our engagement at the beginning of World War II. Now, the reasoning behind Japan's attack is basically down to an old rivalry. The USA and Japan had been rivals for many years. Both countries wanted influence and control over the rich lands of the Far East, which contain coal, timber, rubber, gold, gas, copper, and most importantly, at least for them at this point, oil. The Japanese had begun building an empire in Asia from the 1870s, but they desperately needed oil to continue their dominance. They were getting a lot of their oil from the USA. However, the USA refused to keep selling them oil because they were being expansionist. The Japanese solution was to occupy the Dutch East Indies, which is now Indonesia, and take the oil they needed from there. And so in order to get there, they needed to control a lot of Asia and reduce the influence of the USA in Asia itself. And so their plan to attack Pearl Harbor initially worked, as by 1942 Japan had occupied Hong Kong, Guam, Wake, Malaya, Singapore, the Philippines, New Guinea, and the Dutch East Indies. The capture of Singapore was actually Britain's largest defeat in World War II, and it led to the capture of around 80,000 soldiers. So a huge loss and really damaging for the British in World War II. So then we look at our new weapon. By 1945, Japan was in a desperate position. The war in Europe was over, and they were left to fight on alone. Despite this, the Japanese soldiers did fight on. The new US President Harry Truman decided to use a new weapon developed and tested in the USA in 1945, the atomic bomb. And so at 8:15 on the 6th of August 1945, a B-29 bomber named Enola Gay, it was named after the pilot's mother, dropped the first nuclear bomb on the Japanese town of Hiroshima. 80,000 people were killed instantly. 3 days later, the USA dropped a second bomb on Nagasaki, where over 40,000 people died. The next day, Japan surrendered. Now, there are four main reasons suggested why the USA decided to drop the atomic bomb or bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Firstly, the bomb cost over 2,000 million to develop, so the Americans wanted to test it properly. Some Americans believed that Japan would never surrender. Experts calculated it would cost $500,000 US soldiers to occupy Japan. Now, considering that the Americans lost in entirety in World War II 360,000, this is more than they had lost in the entirety of the war up until that point. The Japanese had been very cruel to the soldiers they captured. Some Americans felt they needed to be taught a lesson. And finally, the USA wanted to show the world, in particular the USSR, how powerful and advanced they were. So what I need you to do first is split your page into four using your pencil and your ruler, and write each of the reasons at the top of each of the four sections, as you can see in the video here. So give yourself time to do that, and please pause the video now. So what I want you to do is work out why the USA did drop the bomb. Which of the four reasons is the most important, the main reason? And so what I need you to do is look through the evidence on the attached document, and you'll need to use evidence from these sources to support each of the four reasons. So have a read through and write down a quote or a description if it's a picture source in each of the boxes to support that reason. So I've got an example for you. So some Americans believed that Japan would never surrender. Experts calculated that it would cost $500,000 US soldiers to occupy Japan. So in source A, we can see there's a quote, "There is no doubt in my mind that these bombs saved many more lives than the tens of thousands they killed." So we've got a clear bit of evidence there supporting that reason. So I'd like you to have a look through sources A to G and then quote in the right box to support which of the four main reasons they support. So give yourself 15-20 minutes or so to have a go at that. Please make sure you do write down in detail the quotes. Here, please pause the video now. Right, some answers then. So for the Americans believe Japan would not surrender, we've got our example from source A, but also a further example from source E. Even killing one American soldier will do. Use your woodwork tools for self-defense. For the cost of the bomb, we have a few. Source D, they were already defeated and ready to surrender. The scientists and others wanted to make this test because of the vast sums of money that had been spent. Source E, there were two slightly different types of bomb. The second bomb was dropped to see if it worked as well as the first. Source F, to experiment with their technology, but couldn't they have dropped it on an uninhabited island nearby? And source G, this source shows a cartoon of a destroyed Hiroshima with the caption, "Don't you see they had to find out if it worked?" One example for the Japanese have been very cruel. That comes from source B. We were talking about people who hadn't hesitated at Pearl Harbor to make a sneak attack, destroying not only ships, but the lives of American sailors. And finally, for powerful and advanced, we've got one from source D. This barbarous weapon was of no real use in our war against Japan. They were already defeated and ready to surrender. And 3 from source F, mainly to show the military strength of the USA at the time, to damage Japan and show the strength of the Allied countries, and lastly, because they had them. What I'd like you to do now is take about 5 or 10 minutes to write a paragraph explaining what the evidence shows us. So what is the main reason that the USA decided to drop the bomb? Now remember, the number of supporting bits of evidence doesn't necessarily make that reason the most important. We've got to be thinking about which of these reasons has the best support. So use the sentence starters here to support you and have a go writing down which one you think is the most important reason. Please pause the video now. Last task then of this lesson, ladies and gents. What I'd like you to do is express your own thoughts on the use of nuclear weapons in World War II by answering the question, can the use of nuclear weapons be justified? So what I'd like you to do is use some evidence from this lesson to support your decision. What evidence is there that the nuclear weapons were justifiable? What evidence is there that they weren't? And then finally, our 3-sentence conclusions to summarize your point. So 10-15 minutes on that. Please make sure you remember to upload your work to ClassCharts when you have finished it. Thanks for listening, guys.